Welcome to the Haunting Horror channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, put a like and write a comment on this video. Have a good time. The storm raged for a day and a night, the wind a banshee howling outside my ramshackle cabin. Rain lashed against the windows, a relentless drumbeat that threatened to shatter the thin panes. Just as dawn peeked hesitantly over the horizon, a booming crack of thunder rattled the very foundation of my home. I sat bolt upright in bed, heart pounding like a trapped bird. Another crack, closer this time, followed by a flash of lightning that illuminated the room for a fleeting instant. In that brief moment, I saw the silhouette of a man stagger past my window, silhouetted against the dying storm. Curiosity gnawed at me. Who in their right mind would be out in such a tempest? I threw on some clothes, boots squelching on the soaked floorboards, and hurried outside. The air was thick with the metallic tang of ozone, the remnants of the storm's fury. Squinting through the lingering rain, I saw a figure hunched over at the edge of the woods, a dark shape against the muddy field. As I approached, the figure straightened, revealing a tall man in a long, billowing coat, water cascading down his brimmed hat. In his hand, he clutched a large, ornately carved briefcase. "Lost, are you?" I called out, my voice hoarse from disuse. He turned, and in the dim light, I saw a face etched with experience, eyes that seemed to hold the swirling colors of the storm. A faint smile played on his lips. "Not lost, friend," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Merely arriving." He gestured towards the briefcase, the brass clasps gleaming weakly. "I bring with me the hopes and dreams of those in need, a traveling emporium of aspirations." Intrigue clawed its way through my initial skepticism. "Hopes and dreams?" I echoed, stepping closer. "In a suitcase." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Appearances can be deceiving, my friend. This case holds more power than you can imagine." I stared at the briefcase, then back at the man. Rain continued to fall, soaking me to the bone. "And what do you expect in return for these dreams?" His smile widened, unsettling in its depth. "A mere trifle, a small price for the fulfillment of your heart's deepest desire." He opened the case a fraction, revealing a glimpse of swirling colors within. A warm, inviting air wafted out, carrying the scent of 1,000 possibilities. My mind conjured an image of my younger self, healthy and whole, before the accident that stole my livelihood and left me a recluse. A flicker of hope, long dormant, stirred within me. And what if my desire isn't something I can afford? I asked, already dreading the answer. He shut the case with a snap, the warmth vanishing into the cool air. "Then perhaps you haven't found the right desire yet, my friend," he said, turning to leave. "But fear not, I'll be staying for a while. The townsfolk are bound to have dreams of their own." He started walking towards the town square, his silhouette swallowed by the rising mist. I watched him go, a battle raging within me. Was it hope or foolishness that urged me to follow? The storm had passed, but a new tempest brewed within me, the promise of a wish versus the unknown cost. The rain had left the town square a muddy mess, but a crowd had gathered nonetheless, drawn by the swirling whispers about the Dream Weaver, as some were already calling him. I shuffled through the throng, dodging elbows and muttering voices. The magician had set up his shop in the abandoned bandstand, the once bright paint peeling and chipped. A banner proclaiming hopes and dreams fulfilled hung crookedly above the entrance. Inside, the air shimmered with a faint lavender light emanating from behind the counter. The only other furniture was a plush armchair, worn but inviting. The magician, now minus his coat that hung from a hook behind him, greeted me with a knowing smile. "Ah, you again," he said, his voice surprisingly warm for someone shrouded in such mystery. "Have you found the dream worth paying the price?" I hesitated, the memory of our encounter by the cabin still fresh. "I'm still not sure what the price might be," I admitted. My gaze drifted towards the briefcase resting on the counter, its brass clasps gleaming like miniature suns. "The price is a reflection of your desire, friend," he said, seemingly reading my thoughts. "The more profound the wish, the greater the sacrifice." A woman with eyes red-rimmed from crying pushed past me, clutching a small child's hand. "My son," she pleaded, voice trembling. "He's been mute since birth. Please give him the gift of speech and take whatever you need." The magician's smile remained unchanged as he reached into his briefcase. A swirl of colors formed in his hand, then solidified into a small, intricately carved whistle. He placed it in the woman's hand. "Blow on this, and your son's voice will be unlocked." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. Taking the whistle, she pressed it to her lips and blew. A high-pitched trill pierced the air, followed by a gasp. The little boy, his eyes wide with wonder, pointed at the magician and babbled excitedly. The woman collapsed to her knees, burying her face in her son's hair, sobs racking her body. A ripple of awe ran through the crowd. I watched, a knot of unease forming in my gut. What price had the woman paid for her son's voice? Had she sacrificed a piece of herself, a future memory perhaps, to grant him this long-awaited gift? The magician's smile widened, his eyes glinting in the lavender light. "Next," he said, his voice ringing in the sudden silence. Hesitantly, I stepped forward. The weight of my own unspoken desire pressed down on me. I started, my voice cracking. "I want to be whole again, to work the land, to feel the sun on my face." The magician studied me, his gaze deep and unsettling. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "An admirable wish," he said, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "But remember, friend, wholeness can come at a great cost." He reached into his briefcase, and a shiver ran down my spine. This time the swirling colors within seemed darker, more menacing. The news of the Dreamweaver spread like wildfire. Every day, the square transformed into a stage for desperate pleas and astonishing displays of fulfilled desires. A baker, crippled by rheumatism, kneaded dough with renewed vigor after a touch from the magician's hand. A young woman, yearning for artistic expression, painted landscapes so vibrant they seemed to pulsate with life. But with each fulfilled dream, a disquiet settled over the town. The baker, once known for his hearty laugh, now moved with a robotic precision, a vacant stare replacing his usual twinkle. The artist's vibrant paintings held a haunting emptiness, landscapes devoid of any living creature. I watched from the periphery, torn between hope and fear. The woman with the mute son became a fixture by the magician's stand, her grateful tears replaced by a vacant smile, an unsettling echo of the baker's vacant gaze. One day, a young farmer named Thomas, known for his fiery temper, stormed into the square. "My wife," he bellowed, shoving aside the crowd. "She's been gone for a week. Promised her an escape from this dreary life." He thrust a worn photograph at the Dreamweaver. The magician studied the picture, a flicker of something akin to surprise crossing his face. "A vacation, you say?" he murmured, his voice devoid of its usual smooth charm. "More than a vacation," Thomas growled, fists clenched. "A chance to see the world, a life beyond these fields." The Dreamweaver closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, they were hard and cold. "Some dreams," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "come at a cost we cannot bear." He reached into his briefcase, but this time he produced nothing. Instead, a dark energy crackled around him, tendrils of shadow lashing out at the photograph. Thomas screamed as the picture withered and crumbled in his hand. "She's gone," the Dreamweaver said, his voice flat. Consumed by a dream too big for its vessel. Terror rippled through the crowd. People began to murmur, the whispers turning into a rising tide of fear and anger. The Dreamweaver, once a source of awe, now stood at the center of a storm brewing within the square. "He's a monster," someone shouted, throwing a rock that smacked against the counter. "He takes more than he gives," another voice echoed. The Dreamweaver straightened, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. "Fear not, my friends," he said, his voice rising above the din. "I offer you all the escape you crave. Follow me." He pointed towards the mountains that loomed on the horizon, their peaks shrouded in a perpetual mist. There the greatest desires await, true liberation from your mundane lives. A stunned silence greeted his proclamation. Then a young mother, her face etched with desperation, stepped forward. "My child is sick," she said, her voice hoarse. "Will you heal him in the mountains?" The Dreamweaver smiled, a cold, hungry smile that sent chills down my spine. "In the mountains," he promised, "we will all find the healing we deserve." A wave of despair crashed over me. Hope had morphed into a ravenous beast, and the townspeople, blinded by desperation, were ready to follow it into the unknown. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this journey wasn't about fulfilling dreams, it was about something far more sinister. The trek into the mountains began with a fevered rush. The townspeople, whipped into a frenzy by the Dreamweaver's promises, surged forward, faces flushed with a perverse mix of hope and fear. I followed, caught in the current of the crowd. The woman with the sick child, her face etched with a desperate hope, clutched my arm, her touch a pleading weight. The journey quickly turned arduous. The sun beat down mercilessly, the once green foothills turning into a harsh, rocky landscape. Within days, the initial enthusiasm began to wane. Grumbles and complaints replaced the excited chatter. Supplies dwindled faster than anticipated, the meager provisions people had brought woefully inadequate for such a demanding journey. One afternoon, a young man named Henry, a cobbler known for his nimble hands and quick wit, stumbled and fell, his ankle twisting at an unnatural angle. Groans of pain escaped his lips as he clutched his leg. The woman with the sick child, her own face gaunt and drawn, stopped beside him. "We can't carry him," she whispered, desperation in her voice. "We barely have enough food for ourselves." A tense silence fell over the group. The Dreamweaver, who had walked aloofly at the front, finally turned. His once smooth face was now etched with impatience. "Those who cannot keep up," he announced, his voice devoid of its usual charm, "are those who do not truly desire the liberation that awaits." His words hung heavy in the air, a chilling reminder of the cost Thomas had paid for a dream too big. A wave of fear washed over the crowd. A farmer, his face creased with worry, looked around at his exhausted family. "We can't leave him," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. The Dreamweaver turned towards him, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "Then choose," he said, his voice dripping with a cold power. "Your own desires or the burden of helping another." The farmer looked from Henry's twisted ankle to his own wife and children, their faces pale with fatigue. Desperation wrestled with empathy in his eyes. Finally, with a heavy sigh, he turned away, his family following close behind. A choked sob escaped the woman beside me. Tears streamed down her face as she leaned down to check on Henry. "Don't worry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I won't leave you behind." I watched her struggle to lift him onto her back, a gesture of futile compassion in a world that seemed to have lost its humanity. The dreamweaver watched them with a cold indifference, a predator observing its prey. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long skeletal shadows across the desolate landscape, I made a decision. Fear gnawed at me, but so did a newfound resolve. I wouldn't be a pawn in the dreamweaver's game. That night, under the cloak of darkness, I crept away from the camp, the faint cries of the sick child, and the ragged breaths of the exhausted travelers fading behind me. I wasn't sure what awaited me back in the town, but in the face of the dreamweaver's darkness, it seemed like the lesser evil. Perhaps there was still time to warn them, to rally them against the sinister force that had taken hold of their dreams. My journey back to town was fraught with peril. The treacherous mountain paths, once a familiar landscape, now seemed to twist and contort in the darkness, mocking my escape. Fatigue gnawed at my bones, every step a battle against the will to simply succumb to exhaustion. Yet the image of the abandoned Henry and the terrified faces of the townsfolk spurred me onward. Reaching the outskirts of town at dawn, I was greeted by a scene of utter desolation. Buildings stood empty, doors hanging open like silent screams. A chilling silence hung in the air, broken only by the mournful cry of a crow circling overhead. Panic clenched my throat. Where was everyone? Stumbling through the deserted streets, I found a single weathered figure huddled in the doorway of the abandoned saloon. It was Sarah, the baker's wife, her once vibrant eyes dull and vacant. The robotic precision of her husband's movements flashed through my mind. "Sarah," I croaked, my voice hoarse from disuse. She flinched at the sound, then slowly raised her head. Where is everyone?" I stumbled over the words, dread creeping into my heart. She stared at me with a chilling emptiness, then pointed a skeletal finger towards the mountains. "Gone," she rasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Gone to find their true selves." Her words confirmed my worst fears. The dreamweaver's promises had not been about fulfilling dreams. It had been about stealing something far more precious, their very humanity. I needed to find help, to warn someone of the danger that lurked beyond the mountain ridges. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the distance caught my eye. A young girl, no older than 10, with fiery red hair and a defiant glint in her eyes, emerged from a side alley. It was Mary, the cobbler's daughter, known for her mischievous spirit and quick wit. "Mary," I cried out, relief washing over me. She spun around, hand instinctively flying to the slingshot strapped to her arm. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by a wary suspicion. "It's me," I said, taking a hesitant step towards her. They followed the dreamweaver into the mountains. "We need to warn everyone." Her face hardened. "Don't mention that name," she hissed, her voice barely a whisper. "He took my father. Said he didn't have a strong enough desire." Tears welled up in my eyes. "We can't let him take anyone else, Mary," I pleaded. "We need to tell the people what's happening." She pondered for a long moment, then a flicker of determination ignited in her eyes. "We'll sound the alarm," she said, her voice gaining strength. "We'll warn everyone not to follow him into those damned mountains." Together, fueled by grief and a newfound resolve, we raced through the deserted town, banging on pots and pans, our frantic shouts echoing through the empty streets. It was a feeble attempt, but it was the only hope we had. As the sun climbed higher, casting its harsh light on the empty town square, a faint rumble echoed from the distance. A tremor ran through the ground, growing in intensity. We looked towards the mountains, a growing sense of dread filling the air. The earth started to crack, a dark chasm splitting the ground at the foot of the mountain range. The air grew thick with dust and the stench of sulfur as the chasm continued to split the earth open. Fear, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. Whatever was happening in the mountains, it was spilling over, infecting the very land with its darkness. Mary clutched at my arm, her eyes wide with terror. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He just wanted their desires." I understood her confusion. We had both witnessed the Dreamweaver's manipulative power, but the scale of this destruction was beyond anything we could have imagined. "We need to get out of here," I said, my voice tight with urgency. But where could we go? The town was deserted, the surrounding fields barren and lifeless. Then, a ragged figure emerged from the cloud of dust at the edge of town. It was the farmer I had seen earlier, the one who had chosen his family over Henry. Relief flooded me, but it was quickly replaced by a sinking feeling as I saw the vacant glint in his eyes. "The Dreamweaver needs more," he rasped, his voice devoid of emotion. His gaze fell on Mary, and a predatory gleam flickered within it. "Leave her alone," I roared, stepping protectively in front of her. My voice startled him momentarily, but the emptiness in his eyes quickly returned. "Strong desire," he mumbled, lunging towards us. Mary reacted faster than I could have anticipated. With a flick of her wrist, she launched a smooth stone from her slingshot, hitting the farmer square in the chest. He stumbled back, a surprised grunt escaping his lips. "Run!" she screamed, grabbing my hand. We sprinted away just as the farmer lunged again, his movements stiff and robotic. We weaved through the deserted streets, the tremor intensifying with each step. Chasing shadows in a ghost town felt surreal, the line between reality and nightmare blurring with each echoing heartbeat. Finally, we reached the edge of town, the chasm yawning open before us like a hungry maw of darkness. We could go no further. We turned, desperation fueling our steps, facing the empty street with nowhere to hide. "There!" Mary cried, pointing towards the abandoned saloon. A rickety wooden ladder hung precariously from its second-floor window. Up there, we scrambled towards the saloon, the farmer's heavy footsteps gaining on us. We reached the ladder, and Mary, with her youthful agility, started climbing. But it wasn't sturdy. As I grabbed the bottom rung, it creaked ominously, threatening to give way. "Go!" Mary yelled down, already halfway up. "I'll hold him off." Panic threatened to consume me, but the thought of leaving her to face the farmer alone spurred me on. Ignoring the tremor shaking the very ground beneath me, I climbed with desperate haste. Just as I reached the top window and pulled myself inside, I heard a sickening crack. The ladder splintered and broke, the farmer disappearing into the swirling dust below. Relief washed over me, momentarily erasing the terror of our situation. "We're trapped," Mary said, her voice small, her earlier bravado replaced by a child's fear. The world outside the window was transforming, the chasm spewing forth an inky blackness that seemed to devour the sunlight. We were at the precipice of whatever horror the Dreamweaver had unleashed, and I had no idea if there was any coming back from it. Dust particles swirled like miniature cyclones within the cramped saloon attic. Sunlight, filtered through cracks in the warped boards, cast an eerie glow on the cobweb-draped bottles lining the dusty shelves. Fear gnawed at me, but Mary, surprisingly, seemed to have regained some of her spirit. "We haven't lost yet," she declared, her voice a thin thread in the oppressive silence. "There must be another way out." She rummaged through a moth-eaten box that sat precariously on a stack of old crates. "Maybe there's a back door," she muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration. I joined her search, a tremor shaking the floor beneath our feet. The air grew heavy, the scent of sulfur stinging my nostrils. The darkness outside seemed to press against the rickety walls, a living entity hungry for more. Suddenly, Mary let out a gasp, pulling a rolled-up parchment from the bottom of the box. "Look," she exclaimed, unfurling it on a nearby crate. It was a faded map of the surrounding area, hand-drawn with shaky lines and cryptic symbols. Hope flickered within me. Maybe it shows another way down the mountain. I pointed to a series of winding paths snaking their way through the terrain depicted on the map. Mary studied the map, her finger tracing a path that started near the saloon and meandered down the mountain through a maze of jagged peaks. "It's a long shot," she said, her voice betraying a flicker of doubt. "But it's our only shot." We huddled over the map, meticulously tracing the path, memorizing its twists and turns. The tremors intensified, the floorboards groaning under the strain. "We need to leave now," I urged, a sense of urgency gripping me. The darkness outside pulsed with an unsettling rhythm, a heartbeat of malevolent energy. We crawled through a small window leading onto the saloon's slanted roof. The chasm yawned beneath us, a vast abyss spewing forth tendrils of inky blackness. The air crackled with a dark energy, making my hair stand on end. Ignoring the dizzying drop below, we navigated the slippery roof, clinging to loose shingles and dodging gaping holes. It was a perilous descent, each step a gamble against a fall into the growing darkness. Finally, we reached the edge of the roof closest to the mountain face. A narrow ledge, barely wide enough for a single foot, offered the only path forward. Below, jagged rocks fell away into a seemingly bottomless pit. "We can do this," Mary whispered, her voice trembling. Steadying myself, I inched onto the ledge, the wind whipping at my face, carrying the stench of sulfur, and something far worse, a cloying sweetness that promised oblivion. As we progressed, the path became even more treacherous. Loose rocks crumbled under our weight, and the chasm seemed to pulsate with a malevolent light. Every step felt like an eternity, the darkness at our backs a living presence. Hours bled into one another, measured by the aching cramp in our legs, and the relentless tremors that shook the very mountain itself. Just when my strength began to fail, Mary, ever the optimist, pointed ahead. "There!" she cried, her voice hoarse but filled with relief. A narrow opening, almost hidden in the shadows, gaped in the mountain face. It was our only hope, and we stumbled towards it with renewed vigor. The entrance yawned before us like a gaping maw in the mountainside. A chilling wind emanated from within, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and something far more unsettling: decay. We huddled together for a moment, the remnants of the day fading into a twilight infused with the unnatural glow of the chasm. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely a rasp against the howling wind. Fear tightened its grip on my throat, but the thought of the ravenous darkness outside was far more terrifying. Mary, her small face drawn and pale, squared her shoulders. "We have to be," she said, her voice resolute despite the tremor in her hands. "There might be another way out on the other side." Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the opening. Mary closed behind me. The passage plunged into immediate darkness, the only light coming from the faint, ominous glow filtering in from the chasm entrance. We fumbled for flint and tinder, the familiar hiss of sparks a beacon of hope in the oppressive gloom. The tunnel snaked its way deeper into the mountain, its walls slick with moisture and the faint smell of mildew. Each step echoed with an unsettling dampness, the air thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. An oppressive silence hung around us, broken only by the occasional drip of water from unseen crevices above. "Do you hear that?" Mary whispered, her voice barely audible. I strained my ears, and then I heard it too. A faint, rhythmic scraping sound, like something dragging itself across stone. It sent a shiver down my spine. We quickened our pace, the scraping sound growing louder with each step. The tunnel began to slope downwards, the air growing colder, and the smell of decay intensifying. Just as panic threatened to engulf me, we emerged into a vast cavern. The sight that greeted us was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. The cavern ceiling shimmered with an otherworldly light, emanating from a colossal crystal formation at its center. Yet, amidst the beauty, there was a sense of decay. Jagged bones littered the cavern floor, some human, others monstrous and impossible to identify. What is this place? I stammered, my voice lost in the vastness of the cavern. Suddenly, the scraping sound reached a crescendo. A hulking figure lumbered out of the shadows, bathed in the eerie crystal light. It was humanoid in shape, but grotesquely misshapen, its flesh a rotting canvas stretched over a skeletal frame. In its dead, milky eyes, a malevolent hunger burned. Terror froze my blood. This was the price the townsfolk had paid for their desires, their very essence twisted into these monstrous abominations. Mary, however, reacted with a defiant yell, hurling a stone from her slingshot straight at the creature's head. The creature roared, a sound that echoed through the cavern like the tolling of a death knell. It charged towards us, its movements surprisingly quick for its size. We turned and fled, our lungs burning, the scraping sound of its claws on stone getting closer with every step. We reached a narrow passage branching off the main cavern and dove through it, the creature's enraged roars echoing behind us. The passage twisted and turned, a labyrinth carved into the mountain's heart. We ran blindly, fueled by pure terror, the flickering light of the cavern entrance receding further with each desperate breath. Finally, exhausted and at the brink of collapse, we stumbled into a small, dead-end chamber. Despair threatened to consume me, but Mary, ever resourceful, spotted a crevice hidden behind a massive boulder. In there, she cried, scrambling towards it. The crevice was narrow, barely large enough for a child to fit through. But it was our only hope. We squeezed inside, the rough stone scraping our skin. It led upwards, a tight crawl that stretched our aching bodies to their limits. Just as my strength seemed to fail entirely, the passage opened into a small cave overlooking the cavern. We collapsed onto the cold, hard floor, gasping for breath. The faint sunlight filtering through a hidden crack in the ceiling offered a sliver of hope, a reminder of the world beyond this nightmare. We made it. Mary rasped, her voice weak but filled with relief. But as we caught our breath, a horrifying realization dawned on me. We were trapped, prisoners in this mountain tomb, with only a sliver of daylight and an unknown horror guarding the way out below. Despair gnawed at me like a starving beast. Trapped in this damp, suffocating cave, we were cut off from any escape route. The faint sliver of sunlight offered a cruel reminder of the world above, a world now seemingly lost to us. Mary, usually brimming with optimism, huddled beside me, her small frame trembling. "How are we ever going to get out of here?" she whispered, her voice cracking with fear. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling a leading weight settle in my chest. But giving up wasn't an option. The townspeople, their humanity stolen and replaced with monstrous forms, were a gruesome testament to what awaited us if we remained passive. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the cavern below caught my eye. The monstrous creature, its grotesque form illuminated by the crystal light, paced restlessly, its dead eyes occasionally scanning the cave we were hiding in. Each guttural snarl sent chills down my spine. "It knows we're here," Mary whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Maybe there's another way out," I murmured, desperately searching the rocky walls for any sign of a hidden passage. My gaze fell on a series of faint etchings on the cave wall, intricate symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. "What is that?" Mary gasped, pointing at the etching. It resembled a swirling vortex, surrounded by strange glyphs that seemed to vibrate with an unknown energy. A glimmer of hope flickered within me. Could these be some kind of ancient warning? A map, perhaps, leading to another exit? With trembling fingers, I traced the symbols, a tingling sensation shooting up my arm as I did. I think I understand what it means," I stammered, my voice breathless. Mary's eyes widened with anticipation. "What does it say?" "It's a portal," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "A way out of the mountain, but what?" she urged, fear tinged with a desperate hope. "It seems to require an offering," I finished, a knot of unease twisting in my stomach. The symbols depicted a sacrifice, a life given in exchange for passage. Mary's face paled. "We can't sacrifice anyone." "There might be another way," I said, my mind racing. The symbols flickered brighter, as if responding to my thoughts. Maybe an offering of memories." I explained the symbols' possible meaning, a bargain with an unknown entity, a trade of memories for passage. Mary pondered it for a long moment, her small face etched with worry. "It's a gamble," she finally muttered, her voice heavy with doubt. "But it might be our only chance," I said, my voice gaining strength. We stared at each other, the weight of the decision bearing down on us. Could we give up a part of ourselves to escape this nightmare? Suddenly, Mary squared her shoulders, a resolute glint returning to her eyes. "Let's do it," she said, her voice firm. We raised our hands towards the symbols, focusing on a single cherished memory, a simple childhood game for her, a night spent under the stars for me. The symbols pulsed brightly, bathed in an ethereal light. The cave floor trembled, and a swirling vortex ripped open in the center, filling the cave with a dizzying energy. Fear battled with relief within me. We had a way out, but at what cost? Taking a deep breath, we closed our eyes and stepped into the swirling vortex. The world spun around us, colors blurring into a dizzying kaleidoscope. Time seemed to stretch and compress until, with a final jolt, we found ourselves sprawled on a grassy hill, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery hues. We were free, but as the shock of our escape wore off, a chilling realization settled in. The memory we offered, the sacrifice we made, felt like a piece of ourselves torn away. A hollow ache resonated within me, a constant reminder of the price we had paid for our escape. Looking out at the familiar yet distant town square, I knew our fight wasn't over. We had to warn the world of the lurking darkness, a darkness fueled by desires twisted into nightmares. And somewhere in the depths of the mountain, the Dreamweaver waited, his hunger for desires, for the very essence of humanity, a hunger that had to be stopped. We stumbled back into the deserted town square, the weight of our ordeal etched on our faces. The once vibrant buildings stood silent, a stark reminder of the townsfolk's fate. The memory I had sacrificed, that peaceful night spent gazing at the stars, felt like a distant dream, a part of me stolen by the mountain's darkness. "We need to find survivors," Mary rasped, her voice hoarse. "Someone has to know what happened." I nodded, a grim resolve settling in my gut. We couldn't let the Dreamweaver continue his insidious work unchallenged. We split up, skirting the deserted streets, calling out into the emptiness. The silence was deafening, broken only by the mournful creak of a swinging signpost. Hours blurred into one another, hope dwindling with each empty house we checked. Just as despair threatened to consume me, I heard a faint sound, a muffled whimper coming from a boarded-up cellar. "Mary!" I yelled, relief flooding my voice. Rushing towards the sound, I pried loose the boards, revealing a dusty staircase leading down into the darkness. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing in the damp confines. A choked sob answered me from the bottom of the stairs. Cautiously, I descended, Mary close behind me. In the dim light filtering through a small grate above, I saw a huddled figure. Sarah, the baker's wife. Her eyes, once bright and cheerful, were now dull and vacant. "Sarah," I whispered, kneeling beside her. She flinched at the sound of her name, but a flicker of recognition sparked in her glazed eyes. "You're back," she rasped, her voice barely audible. "We failed. He took everything." "No, Sarah," I said gently, taking her hand. "We can still fight him. But we need your help. Tell us what happened in the mountains." Sarah's vacant stare deepened for a moment, then a tremor ran through her body. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she gasped, a guttural moan escaping her lips. They offered a choice," she rasped, her voice distorted as if by an unseen force. "A dream for a part of ourselves. We all wanted so much." Memories flooded back to her, her voice gaining strength. She spoke of the Dreamweaver's seductive promises, of the townsfolk's desperate yearning, and the chilling realization that the dreams came at a terrible cost. He feeds on desires," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling, "twisting them, turning them into nightmares." A horrifying picture emerged. The Dreamweaver, a malevolent entity thriving on humanity's deepest yearnings, warping them into monstrous desires that consumed his victim's very essence. "There has to be a way to stop him," I said, my voice tight with determination. Sarah opened her eyes, a sliver of defiance flickering within them. "There might be," she rasped, "a hidden chamber, deep within the mountains. Where he stores his power." Hope surged through me. This was our chance, a way to strike at the heart of the darkness. But reaching the chamber, facing the Dreamweaver in his own lair, seemed like a suicide mission. "We can't go alone," Mary said, stepping forward. "We need help." Sarah nodded weakly. "Tell everyone the truth about the Dreamweaver. We can fight him, together." We emerged from the cellar, a renewed purpose fueling our steps. The town remained deserted, but a flicker of hope, fragile yet persistent, burned within us. We had a plan, a desperate gamble, but it was our only chance to save the townspeople and prevent the darkness from spreading beyond these mountains. Spreading the word proved harder than we anticipated. The surrounding villages, nestled in the foothills, bathed in an unsettling twilight, were eerily quiet. Fear, like a thick fog, had settled over the land. People huddled behind locked doors, peering at us with suspicion through barbed windows. "They won't believe us," Mary muttered, her voice heavy with frustration. We had recounted our ordeal, described the horrors within the mountain, but our words seemed to bounce off the villagers' fear, leaving no impression. "We need proof," I said, a grim determination hardening my resolve. Back in the deserted town square, we rummaged through the abandoned houses, finally emerging with a tattered scroll and a shard of a crystal from the cavern. The scroll, miraculously untouched by the elements, depicted a map of the mountain range, its once familiar landmarks twisted and distorted. A single jagged line snaked its way towards the heart of the mountains, marked with a cryptic symbol that resonated with a chilling familiarity, the swirling vortex we had used to escape. The crystal shard, imbued with the cavern's otherworldly light, pulsed faintly in my hand. It felt wrong, a fragment of the darkness we sought to destroy. Yet it thrummed with an undeniable power, a power we might be able to use to our advantage. This scroll shows a hidden chamber, I explained to a group of weary-looking villagers huddled in a dusty tavern. Sarah, the baker's wife, told us it's where the Dreamweaver stores his power. The villagers huddled closer, their eyes flitting nervously between us, the scroll and the pulsating crystal shard. A wizened old woman, her face lined with worry, stepped forward. "But why would you risk going back? What if it's a trap?" "It is," Mary said bluntly, her voice ringing with defiance. "But it's the only way to stop him. He'll take your dreams too, twist them into nightmares that will consume you." Her words hung heavy in the air. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a flicker of fear battling with a nascent determination in their eyes. "We can't just sit here and wait for him to come for us." A young man finally spoke, his voice trembling slightly. "We have to fight back." His words seemed to spark something within the villagers. Heads began to nod, a quiet resolve settling over the room. An old hunter emerged, a weathered rifle slung over his shoulder. "We may not be heroes," he said, his voice gruff but steady, "but we ain't letting some mountain monster take our town without a fight." One by one, others stepped forward, offering their skills and whatever weapons they could muster: pitchforks, hunting knives, even a rusty old musket. It wasn't much, but in their eyes burned a fierce determination to protect their homes, their families, their very essence from the encroaching darkness. As dawn painted the horizon with a hopeful blush, we set out, a ragtag group armed with a mix of fear and defiance. The journey back into the mountains was fraught with danger. The once familiar paths were treacherous, the air thick with an oppressive silence broken only by the occasional screech of a raven circling overhead. The closer we got to the chasm, the more pronounced the tremors grew. The ground itself seemed to writhe in unease, the air crackling with an unseen energy. Yet we pressed on, fueled by a shared purpose, the weight of the townspeople's hopes resting on our shoulders. Finally, we reached the entrance to the tunnel, the gaping maw spewing forth tendrils of inky darkness. Fear threatened to paralyze me. With a glance at the determined faces around me, at Mary's resolute gaze, steeled my resolve. We had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, we plunged into the darkness, the fate of the town, and perhaps beyond, hanging in the balance. The air within the tunnel hung thick and stagnant, the stench of decay growing stronger with each step. The faint, ominous glow filtering in from the chasm entrance provided little comfort, casting long, distorted shadows that danced grotesquely on the damp walls. The tremors had intensified, the ground vibrating beneath our feet like a restless beast. We navigated the treacherous path with a newfound urgency. The villagers, their initial bravado slightly dampened by the oppressive atmosphere, stuck close together, their weapons clutched tightly in sweating hands. Mary, ever the pragmatist, kept watch at the front, the crystal shard in her hand pulsing erratically, its otherworldly light cutting through the gloom. "It's getting stronger," she muttered, her voice vaguely audible of the tremors. The shard, once cool to the touch, now radiated an unsettling heat, a malevolent energy thrumming within it. A sudden chilling screech echoed through the tunnel, sending shivers down my spine. A monstrous form, vaguely humanoid, but twisted beyond recognition, lumbered out of the darkness, its dead eyes fixated on us. It was one of the townspeople, their humanity stolen and warped into a grotesque mockery by the Dreamweaver's power. Panic threatened to erupt, but the old hunter stepped forward, his weathered face grim. With a steady hand, he raised his rifle and fired. The creature shrieked again, a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality, before collapsing in a heap of rotting flesh. The sound of the gunshot acted as a catalyst. The villagers, their fear momentarily replaced by a surge of adrenaline, charged forward. A desperate fight ensued, a clash of makeshift weapons against the monstrous creations of the Dream Weaver. The tunnel echoed with the clang of metal, the sickening thud of flesh against bone, and the tormented roars of the creatures. Mary and I fought alongside the villagers, adrenaline masking the exhaustion gnawing at our bones. She used her slingshot with deadly accuracy, her aim fueled by a righteous fury. I wielded a rusty crowbar, scavenged from an abandoned house, each swing fueled by a desperate hope to save our home. The fight was brutal, a desperate struggle against an enemy fueled by twisted desires. One by one, the villagers fell, their sacrifices buying us precious time. Grief threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced it down, channeling my emotions into a relentless assault. Finally, with a bone-splitting roar, the last creature crumpled to the ground. We stood panting, surrounded by the carnage, the weight of our victory heavy on our shoulders. Yet, the battle wasn't over. We had to reach the chamber to confront the source of this darkness. Pushing forward, we emerged into the vast cavern we had seen before. The colossal crystal formation pulsed with an even greater intensity, bathing the cavern in an ethereal glow. But amidst the beauty, the true horror unfolded. In the center of the cavern, tethered to the crystal formation by tendrils of inky darkness, writhed the Dream Weaver. His once smooth face was now contorted with rage, his eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. But what truly sent chills down my spine was the sight of the townsfolk, their stolen humanity condensed into shimmering orbs of light, swirling around the Dream Weaver, feeding his power. "We have to stop him," Mary whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. We had stumbled upon the heart of the darkness, and the sight filled me with a cold dread.